Ducati's DesertX adventure bike has been a massive hit since it was launched last year, and so it looks like they're about to double down on its success with a new, more off-road bias variant rumored to be called the DesertX Rally. These spy shots have been out testing of Greystar Des this week, and there have also been filings with the California Air Resources Board that seem to confirm its naming. So in this video, we'll go over absolutely everything that we know about it so far, and then at the end, I'll tell you why I think Ducati are onto a good thing with this one. First up, the fundamentals of this new model are most likely going to be very similar to the existing DesertX, at least according to some of the filings that have been submitted so far. The 937cc Testa Stretta liquid-cooled V-twin looks like it'll put out the exact same performance figures of 110 horsepower at 8,250 RPM and 92 Nm of peak torque at 6,500, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You see, those figures are right in line with the other more extreme adventure bikes on the market, like the KTM 890 Adventure R, which makes 105 horsepower at 8,000 RPM and 100 Nm of peak torque at the same 6,500. Plus, with this bike being more geared towards off-roading, you don't really need any more power. In fact, the Enduro riding mode on the existing DesertX already limits peak output to 75 horsepower, which is plenty enough, and yet it's delivered with maximum throttle response for quick reactions to the terrain directly in front of you. Weight also looks to be pretty much the same as the existing model, so about 202 kilograms dry or 223 kilograms curb, and while that is slightly more than the KTM 890 at 210 kilograms, and even more than the newly updated BMW F900 GS at 219, it's still perfectly reasonable for this style of bike and probably shows that there are no huge changes to the architecture. But I'd still expect plenty of tweaks to the details, and perhaps the modified DesertX that they ran at Austria's Erzberg Rodeo Rally event, piloted by Antoine Mayo, a multiple Enduro World Champion and European Supercross Champion, could give us some clues. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly for tackling an event of this nature, they spec'd it out with upgraded suspension. As standard, you get a fully adjustable 46mm upside-down KYB fork on the DesertX, and a monoshock that's also from KYB and that's also fully adjustable. But the Erzberg Rodeo spec bike was on a girthier 48mm fork, which should give it a bit more rigidity, and there's an upgraded shock, both of which got more travel as well, which of course helps it to tackle even more challenging terrain. The spy shots of this new bike do look like it's sitting a little bit taller, so almost certainly we'll see the same here. And it's a common approach with bikes like the KTM 890 Adventure R or the Yamaha Tenere World Raid, intended for more intensive off-roading, both getting upgraded longer suspension, and so I think this one is pretty much nailed on. A quick look at the pics also show the same size wheels on this rally model, with a 21-inch spoke tubeless at the front and an 18-incher at the rear. These are generally the optimal sizes for an adventure bike for off-road riding, with more diameter making them more capable of rolling over challenging surfaces and also opening up a wide range of off-road specific tire choices. The standard bike comes on Pirelli's Scorpion Rally STR tires, which are decent all-rounders but definitely a little bit more road biased and suited more so to moderate off-roading and gravel. For proper muddy stuff, you'd want to be on something more knobbly, like the narrow Metzler 6 Days Extreme tires fitted to the Erzberg Rodeo bike. But looking at the spy shots, it looks like it's fitted with the Scorpion Rallies as standard, because look, realistically you need to be able to ride the bike home from the dealer in reasonable comfort. But it is worth adding that the DesertX is homologated for a range of on and off-road tires, and so you can always swap them out later. Another big improvement to the Erzberg Rodeo bike is a more substantial bash guard under the bike to save it from big impacts from rocks and the like, which are almost unavoidable on an extreme event of this nature. So this will almost certainly be the case with the production version, and you can see in the spy shots something that looks more robust, and it also has the struts that go up and through the engine mounts for extra rigidity. Now you've also got the radiator guard from the accessories catalog visible, and that's going to protect it from debris and stones that might get flicked up from the front wheel, and so it should stop those from punching a hole in the radiator and putting a premature end to your ride. I'm perhaps a little bit surprised they stopped there though, because you've got the headlight guard in the accessories catalog, the engine bars, more substantial reinforced hand guards, all of which would make sense on a rally variant like this, but I guess they had to draw the line somewhere in terms of keeping a cap on the cost. At least the engine bars though would have been nice to see. You'll find them on other off-road adventure bikes like the Tiger 900 Rally Pro, and it makes sense because you'd be expecting to lay it down from time to time, and so of course you want to minimize damage. Now that Erzberg Rodeo version also used the accessory Terminioni silencer silencer, which I guess gave it a little bit of a boost in terms of performance. And there are two on the Ducati configurator, one that's for racing use only, and then one that's actually approved for the road, and so presumably a little bit quieter. Naturally, they fitted the racing version to the race bike, and they claim that it increases power and torque by 7%, both at peak and also in the sort of mid-range, and it also cuts weight by 2.5 kilograms. Now, the Spied bike, although it's slightly obscured by the heat shield on the luggage mounts, it seems to use the standard silencer, which is a bit of a shame. An extra bit of Italian bling would have suited this bike quite nicely, but with those two options costing, well, $1,602 for the road version, £2,289 for the racing one, it'd probably affect the price of the bike too much to bundle them in. Then there's the rear fuel pod, which I'm surprised not to see on this bike. You see, as standard, you get the 21-litre tank, which I think is totally fine, and it should give you a couple of 100 miles range if you're riding steady, but you do have the option to fit an 8-litre pod at the rear, rally inspired, and then that extra fuel can be pumped into the main tank using a button on the switchgear once the main tank gets below a certain point. It's certainly a unique feature. It was definitely a good talking point as well when the bike was first launched, and it does take the total capacity up to 29 litres, which is almost on a par with proper globetrotters like the BMW GS Adventure, the Triumph Tiger 1200 Explorers, and also the Ducati Multistrada V4 Rally. But the thing is, on the downside, it would limit luggage carrying abilities, and it's also another expensive part at £1,315. So again, this one looks a little unlikely to make the cut. Now, as standard, the DesertX comes with a two-part seat that sits at 875mm for the rider, and there are some options in the accessories catalog to go a little bit higher or lower. But it looks like the Spied bike has the same bench-style rally seat as the Erzberg Rodeo version, which does bring quite a few benefits. I mean, firstly, it's 20mm up, which takes the total seat height up to 895, and that should help with slightly easier transitioning between sitting and standing, which of course you'd be expecting to do a lot if you're taking it on a proper rally ride. Then there's also the space it offers in terms of back and forth movement, which means the rider can more easily transfer their weight on the bike and also move around for comfort if they're riding it over distance. Lastly, it's narrower, so that should also help to make the bike more controllable when you're pushing it around with your knees. Now, there are also luggage racks visible on this Spied bike, but I think I'd be surprised if they came as standard. Generally, that's the sort of feature you'd expect on a GT or touring version, and it would be another big hit in terms of price, so I think these are fitted just for testing or to carry data recording equipment on other test rides. Now, there is what they call a utility bar fitted to the Spied bike, and this can be used to mount a GPS unit or a smartphone to navigate, and again, this makes total sense for this style of bike, so I would expect to see this one as standard. From a styling perspective, well, the bike is pretty well covered up with black wrap, so you can't get a great view of the paint job, but given that it's got the red painted subframe, which hasn't been used before, I'd expect new colors and a new graphical treatment for this model. It's more than likely going to be inspired by that Erzberg Rodeo bike, which also carried the red on the rear, and you can see the white on the tank and the red around the cockpit peeping through the wrap, which would match up with that bike. The only major difference is the high mounted front mudguard, which admittedly does allow for more mud clearance, but it also gives it a bit more of that off-roady look. Thing is, I think I prefer the way the Erzberg Rodeo bike looked with the low mudguard, but let me know which bike you'd pick down in the comments below. Now, price-wise, the standard bike is £14,795, which ain't cheap. Look at a standard KTM 890 Adventure, for example, or a new F900 GS, or a Tiger 900 Rally. These bikes are all more so around the 12,000 mark, and so you're already paying a bit of a premium for the DesertX. Thing is, though, it's a fantastic bike to ride and a fantastic bike to look at, and so perhaps it's justifiable to spend that extra bit, especially if this is your sort of dream bike. Naturally, I'd expect this rally version to be a little bit more. I spec'd up the standard bike on their configurator, and with some fancy paint and some of the accessories I could see on the Spied test bike, it came out at more like $16,300, and that's without the upgraded suspension. So I'd expect at least that sort of cost, if not a little bit more. I still think this might be a great seller though, even though the DesertX as standard is brilliant off-road, because if you look at the Tenere 700, which prides itself on off-road ability, that didn't stop them producing the World Raid version and the more extreme versions, which give it that extra capability on trails. It's almost like Yamaha were doubling down on that very capable image of the bike, and so why wouldn't the same thing work for Ducati? But as always, I'd love to know what you think of it, so do let me know down in the comments below. If you're more of a road rider, then you might want to check out the Multistrada Multistrada V2, which shares the same engine. I rode the DesertX and that bike back to back at Ducati's headquarters in the UK last year, and so here's a comparison on the screen now so you can give it a click and give it a watch. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't already as well to see more of the latest motorcycle news right here on YouTube. Many thanks for watching today, and we'll catch you in the next one.